Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside you guys. Sorry for the delay here. Just got back from Italy yesterday. A crazy trip. I'm a man of my word. As you can see, I don't know if it's showing Santangelo, but Milan winning the derby meant I had to buy a Davide Calabria kit. I didn't get that many weird looks at myself from the people working at Casa Milan. So yeah, it was quite the experience. We'll get into everything in a second. But first, how are you? How are you doing? Hair growing back quickly.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Nah, it's always interesting. People always comment on like, "Oh, you shaved the beard. Oh, you shaved the hair. Maybe that's gonna bring us good luck." And I always love seeing like those sorts of things in the comments. But yeah, no, everything's been good. It's having a little bit of time off. To just kind of digest some of the more recent results
Mm,
and you know um, you get my thoughts out briefly on social media. I haven't been on there too much, which has been
a
good
good thing.
for me. So I'm happy to get back, and then obviously with you returning, and hopefully some more Serie A games coming up, unless of course those get rained out as well, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. We'll try and maybe cover that at the end if we have some time, but this one will be relatively quick compared to
Mm.
most of the stuff. So yeah, um, I traveled halfway across the world to go and view this one, Milan Udinese. Um, Really unfortunate timing because of the Teo Hernandez suspension. So I guess I'll kind of start about, I guess, my experience and my side of things, and what it was like to get there. The weather was really poor the entire trip, pretty much. Obviously, there was a ton of rain. It's why the Bologna match won't be being played this weekend, um, because of all the issues over there. So yeah, I mean, walking up to San Siro was a really cool and unique experience, as one could imagine. Like you see it so often on television, it's just digesting and consuming so much of the club over the years. I wasn't one of those people who had like, these like goosebumps, basically like seeing the stadium and any of that, like not even walking up to the seats. Um, Obviously, it was very old, in terms of like how it was built, the steps, and all the little things in there. You
Mhm.
understand why there needs to be a new stadium. Um, but once you get there, it was great. We caught up with Pete, from the Milan club. He said hello. It was great to see him. So yeah, obviously the Curva protesting as well was sort of unfortunate. So the atmosphere wasn't completely at the level that it could be, but
Mhm.
they were getting loud in the final 10 minutes of the match. Um, so yeah, this one was crazy. It was your typical Milan Udinese match, where there was a bunch of chaos, stoppage time, whatnots happening there. The Reinders red card really deflated what I had thought was a good start for Milan. Coming out with this sort of lineup where Leao is sitting
Mhm.
for himself. We have Morata starting up top as the 9, and Fonseca finally giving Chukwueze more of a chance. And after I went live on our channel to sort of discuss that Fiorentina review and how I thought his cameo was not that bad for 10 minutes, to see him score was a very great experience because I thought he made a great run. Well, I mean, it was really started with Noah Okafor and then facilitating over to Pulisic and Pulisic again. I mean, I don't know what else this guy can't do at this point because he's stepping up in almost every single role imaginable. And that one was courtesy as the number 10. Fonseca was ranting and raving about it post match as well on how versatile Chris really is. And again, he's really starting to even come more into his own as a personality at the club. We see him doing post match interviews in Italian now as well. Um, everybody there was just it was a great atmosphere.
Mhm.
In the sense of it was similar to U.S. sports and how like the duration of the 90 minutes. It was sort of like, okay, yeah, this is like pretty much your atmosphere that you would usually get from the fans in the stadium. But again, the second the Curva started to do their thing, it completely like flipped on its head. I think when you hear some of the songs inside of the stadium, and their energy, that's when I sort of was like, holy shit, this is incredible. This is a really unique experience that if you are a fan who is fortunate enough to make that trip, if you live on this side of the world, I highly suggest you do it. Even if it's just one time, like if I don't go to a game there again at San Siro, I'd be okay with it because just even the one time itself was totally worth it. And again, just to see them win, the Reinders red card was so annoying because I knew instantly that it was going to happen because you couldn't really tell obviously with the contact in the stadium. I'm not sure if the replays were at home with it. It kind of looked like the player tripped on its own 2 feet and maybe TG had some slight contact. It was understandable. I understand why it was a red card from that perspective. But really, Matt, throughout that match, the refereeing was an absolute disaster. Zero control within this one. Udinese should have had multiple yellow cards, even in the first half, to kind of start that. The fact that there was nothing in the Chukwueze foul where he gets stomped on was just mind-boggling in itself. But yeah, your kind of thoughts on this one. Again, this kind of felt more like we'll just take the 3 points, and we're kind of fortunate that Tammy's shoulder injury wasn't as long term as it could have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this was a match that I was following a little bit on my phone. I was out and about, and then I started looking at the Foot Mob, updates. I get the alerts and stuff like that. So I was kind of following it that way. I wasn't too invested in it. Again, I know some people, including yourself, probably watched the entire game, so you could speak more on like actual instances and moments in the match and just feel and vibe and officiating and how that was going. But when I saw that there was the equalizer late and then the VAR overruled it, I was like, some relief, but it felt like, again, like a very on-brand performance. And this is something I've been, harping on. We've been talking about it, and I had this sort of rant, if you will, in our previous episode, I think, or the one before, that, how am I going to give this team the credit? How am I going to give them my confidence that they're going to put forth the right performance and get the result? And, they've been so week to week. I mean, they've had really good highs, they very few and far in between. The big high of the derby, and you're like, oh my gosh, like they pulled out a victory like this. This team has they turn the corner.
Yeah.
And then they'll put out performances against Fiorentina and the Udinese one that even though they won that Udinese match, it's like
playing down a man was so deflating.
That's what it kind of you have to kind of contextualize, right? When we speak on certain things like this, because people can say, well, Matt, like they were down a guy, and that changes the entire momentum of the game, and I understand that. So just to get a win in of itself, that's always my belief. In matches like that, where you're down and you're down for a better part of the match, I don't care really how truly you do it. If you get a win, I'm not going to sit here and split hairs and start bitching and moaning on a podcast. Like, I won't do that. So in their defense, like the fact that we got the victory, the 3 points when we absolutely needed them off the international break was crucial. Again, it's just, there really isn't too much to speak on as far as like what I took away from it as like, hey, we did this well, or we didn't do this. Like it seemed as though more or less it was a copy paste of what we've seen through most of the season so far. So you take the result any way you can get it, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I think at some point, we're going to get into that part of the season where we have to ask the question, like, if not now, when? As far as finding really good footing and playing consistent football. I'm not saying every match is going to be perfect and polished. I'm not saying that, nor do I expect that, because the truth of the matter is this: with a new coach, new personnel, new ideas, and just a more competitive Serie A, in my opinion, as we're seeing this year, not every result is going to go your way. But I think more or less, I think we have to start seeing soon more consistent play and more consistent results from Milan.
Yeah. On a final note with the Reinders thing, and I'll kind of speak on what you were saying. The red card is unfortunate, and a lot of people made this point, and I agree with a lot of people too.
Mm-hmm.
He should not be the guy tracking back at the end there. Your midfielder in that situation, I know a lot of people pointing towards Terracciano, other players within that instance, and you're sort of like, where are the defenders in that situation?
Right.
Again, a communication breakdown. I thought Chow was very solid. It's a lot more fun, obviously, to watch matches in person because, yeah, the television and the broadcast usually has a focus on where the ball is because that's the whole point of like the broadcast. But at times you really just like your eyes wander and you're sort of looking at other players and where they
Yeah.
are positionally and how they're kind of, putting themselves in an advantageous spot. I thought Chow, again, I always like to make this point, and I know it's kind of like a common thing, is that when you normally don't call a defender's name throughout an entire match, that's usually a good thing. That's kind of where I felt Chow came into play here. Very happy for him. I think he needed that sort of positive performance. Pavlovic is just like a psycho. Just he's like a whirling dervish of a player.
Yeah.
I really like some of the things that he does, and the other times you're just like, oh my god, dude, like you got to get it together because it's volatile. Very close to a potential penalty towards the end there. I don't think it was. I think that was like ridiculous if it would have been one. There was contact from another player touching him as well. So that was kind of that. I think Fonseca's selection here were interesting. I know a lot of people want to point towards the negatives because of Leao and sort of all that stuff. But for me, I think it's sort of utilizing the depth offensively that we really didn't get to see too much from Pioli. Obviously, Chukwueze hadn't had too much of a chance to start this season. But again, starting to slowly see him integrated more. We saw it in the Champions League, which we'll get to as well. But in this one, getting his first start like this, I was really happy with pretty much how he handled everything. Getting that goal for him, it was just cookie cutter in terms of the way his game is, bending that shot into that corner. I thought he made a great run. Really a bunch of positive actions for the most part. I think even going with Noah Okafor as well. We got to see how much more he can be in terms of his dynamic play because we've seen him as a striker to start the year, and then he switches over to the left side where I thought he was really strong in terms of attacking prowess, taking players on. He always tries to do this dribble on the touchline, but near goal. I don't know if you noticed, he tried dribbling around a player because he's so capable of doing it. We've seen him dust Kalulu, but it's sort of like sometimes, hey, it's okay if you take the corner there. The angle really isn't there to pull off a pass. We saw it again against Club Brugge. But again, I love how Fonseca sort of approached the majority of this match up until that final substitute where Tammy Abraham had to come off. This idea of subbing Loftus-Cheek on was insane to me. Insane. And I really don't want to rip Fonseca because I think he's done some positive things. He's mixing and matching how certain stuff has gone in terms of, hey, like I have some players here at my disposal. I need to figure this out while I'm tinkering with the squad and the lineup. But at the same time, as you mentioned, there needs to be consistency on a larger scale because, like you're saying, great results are great results. But how great are they if they come in spots? They have to be consistent over time. We're not saying win every single big game, but you can't be, winning the derby, having kind of fallen flat against Leverkusen, and then that sort of performance against Fiorentina where you ride into the international break. You're like, okay, so what are we? Like, what is this situation here? How can we improve and build off of those Inter games and then come back with a couple of those? So that I think that's what's frustrating. But again, the attack is just the chances that they were creating. Tammy should have scored. He fell. That was unfortunate. Loftus-Cheeks completely ruined that counterattack where he had Fofana out wide. Again, like saying with the broadcast, it looks so much worse in person because you see the amount of space Fofana has. And to just do a really poor job of distributing on a counter like that is so frustrating because if that goal were to have stood at the end of the match, we're looking at a draw instead of Milan executing in the areas in which they should. And that's a reflection on Fonseca putting in someone like Loftus-Cheek in a situation like that and so on. So I think it was frustrating in that sense. Not too much left to kind of talk about with that, but your kind of final thoughts on Pulisic here, because it feels like week over week, the sort of popularity and traction of his presence within the club is only gaining steam, because right now this guy is not only consistent, he's playing great, he's doing it in multiple roles. It kind of feels like at times he's sort of carrying us, because his execution in the final third is just, it's phenomenal. It really is.
Yeah, Pulisic is, in the form of his career. I think he's doing it at the international level, and he's been doing it for really since he arrived at Milan. And I think in year one, I think the most important thing for fans to see was he producing, right? Because there was this big talk around, okay, we finally have upgrades at right wing. We finally have guys in the attack not named Rafa Leao that can do something, that can make the difference. So I think for him to put up the numbers he did year one was very important. But I think year two, you're quickly seeing him evolve as a character within this team. His personality is evolving in such a way that now you feel as though that he can be a leader. And I know this was Paulo Fonseca's discussion regarding, some of the players, weeks ago when he decided to make like Rafael Leao captain, and, they talked about Pulisic, and then he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but he's not there yet. He's not at that level. But I think you're starting to see, Pulisic with his comfortability within the league, comfortability within this team, and, amongst this group, to take on more responsibility as someone that within a game can be a little bit more of a quarterback, right? I like to use that sort of comparison there, because in football, that's the main position. That's the position, that's the shot caller. Everyone's looking at them on every single play on offense as, okay, they have the ball. They're the ones that is the focus, and they're the one that can dictate this game and how this game plays out. And I think we're starting to see a lot of those, traits and characteristics and qualities with Christian Pulisic. So I think this year, beyond the numbers, I'm very pleased to see how he's emerged as a player that within a match, he's searching for that ball. He's seeking that opportunity in that moment. And I'm not saying he didn't do that last year, but I think it's different when you have, at a big club, different personalities, players that have been here, that have won trophies here, like Rafa, Teo, and Giroud, and for you to kind of feel your way within that dynamic and to try to say, okay, like, where's my place to call for the ball? Where's my place to say, no, I'm doing this or I'm doing that? Or within a match, I know where I'm going to be. I'm going to take up a different role that maybe isn't within my assignment, but I know that I got to take responsibility and kind of grab the game by the scruff, because that's what it's calling for. So I think we're starting to see more of that with Pulisic this year. And frankly, if I'm being honest, it's almost by force and at the right time, because we've talked about, Rafa's, wavering form. He has moments where he looks very good, and then people will not watch the entire game and think, well, he didn't get a goal or an assist, so he didn't play well. But I think when you look at Pulisic, he's really taking on such responsibility and such pressure, at this moment in time, and he's delivering despite all that. So I think that, we've talked about Pulisic at length, right? The impact on the American market and the fact that he's having such great success. I mean, he's doing it in the Champions League too, right? People were saying he wasn't scoring goals in the Champions League. He scored against Liverpool. He's having the goals that he scored against Club Brugge. So it's like, now it's becoming one of those things where it's like, he's shaking this, in my opinion, he's shaking this sort of label as, oh, he's the best American player, to being just a great player. And that's what I think we really want to see from Pulisic. I think that, people will still have this sort of perception of American players playing in Europe. They can't hack it. They're MLS bound. At Milan, Donovan was like, he should have went to MLS. So for us to see Pulisic, saying, I'm not just a good American player, a great American player, I'm a great player, period. I think that's very important, and it's something that, it's very pleasing to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this type of production is otherworldly. Because again, like, people have to remember when all these stats get posted on like the most goal contributions in 2024 as a calendar year, you're seeing him at the top of the list. And it's funny because Milan's have two players on that list. Again, one is being treated like Judas, like I said, and Leao, whereas production is that high. Like, it's so insane.
And that's not fluky too. You can't say, because I've seen stats contorted and twisted where it's like, March and most goal contributions in 2024, and they've only played 3 games, and then there's a national break, and he's got the most goal contributions. He's like, you're talking about pretty much the year almost being over. We're approaching November, and Pulisic is amongst the best in Europe, not just like top world football, Europe, the best leagues, and as being someone that's in that conversation of like, I'm with the best of the best, like I'm with the top players. So that shows you that he's had that consistency, and we've always been big believers and backers of players having the body of work, and he's got the body of work too.
Yeah, I mean, again, what my final point on the statistics was going to be is that, this is a winger. These are not players, the both of them, but primarily Pulisic, like not a set piece taker. As we know those situations, where he's only gotten 1 penalty for Milan. He's literally on the set pieces for corner kicks. Milan haven't come close really in terms of drawing fouls for free kicks in the area to score from. I also don't think we kind of have a player that is that great at those.
Johnny, maybe.
In terms of scoring free kicks, I don't think there's anyone that's like kind of solidified themselves as like, okay, that's our guy. We want him taking those. With no Benacer or Tonali at this point either, that kind of looms larger in terms of that whole. But again, it's just great. The consistency is there. He's really hitting his prime in terms of age, experience, where his health is. Knock on wood, he's done a great job of taking care of himself, and also the club in turn as well with that. So overall, you're just so happy to see that, and us as Americans, and obviously there's other tons of Americans who follow and listen to the podcast as well, know how versatile Chris is, know how he leads in a different way. Much like Rafa's not like, I don't think of like leader when I think of him. Pulisic, for example,
like leading like in a messy way.
Exactly.
That was Messi's a little bit more quiet, reserved, but like in certain like moments,
lead by example.
Match, you feel like his presence. You feel like, okay, he's going to say the right thing to the right player, and he's going to lead that way. I mean, I think we've talked about this too. Everyone wants this rah type leader. That's
everybody thinks you have to be like Michael Jordan or this like dominant personality where it's only that type of guy that wins. Like Tom Brady's like in your face on the sideline, screaming at you, demanding you to be better. Again, there's different style of managers who do stuff like that. There's different styles of players. Everybody is different. And I think the way Pulisic has sort of adapted as a personality and a leader has just been great to see. And again, if you're kind of him, like, this is as great as it's going to get for the most part. It could get better, but again, you're at one of the biggest clubs in the world. You're playing incredibly well in terms of consistency. You haven't played at a bigger club, in our opinion, obviously. So to just sort of do this, there's still levels to reach. There still are, because the team has to start competing and winning some massive matches. So moving on.
Real quick on Pulisic, just more of like a random question for you since you were there. How was it with the Pulisic turnout? Like, was there a lot of people wearing jerseys? Did you see jerseys around a lot? I know the weather was
kind of hard to tell, because when you get seated there, everybody's obviously like in seats. There was like a bunch of like different kits all over the place. Rafa was like the number one, but also at the same time as well, people had jackets on because it was raining, so you couldn't really sort of see when you're like walking in the stadium. And also when you're in there, it's not like American sports where there's so many stoppages and breaks and stuff.
Or like you're in the grandstand and you're walking to get concessions. And
I mean, Pulisic kits, I didn't see that many of. Really, when I was like near Duomo and all that kind of stuff, Rafa's like the kit. When you see like the young kids around wearing kits, it's Rafa. I didn't see too many of the others. Everyone just had like kits on, but there's also like nameless like kits on the back too. I had my Tonali kit. So I decided to bring that one. So yeah, I mean, listen, I think Chris on a larger scale is gaining immense popularity. And as we both know as supporters, and maybe for some people who kind of are largely U.S. men's national teams fans that have started to follow Milan recently, what I could tell you guys, and I'm sure you could back this up too, is you're definitely better accepted or more well received when you're embracing the culture. Not to say that he didn't embrace the culture last year, because it's difficult to speak a language. Obviously, he speaks German as well, but to sort of adapt and it's sort of almost like announcing yourself, because not a lot of people do speak English out there, as much as some people would like to believe. Of course, people speak English everywhere. It's more of a modern city in terms of, like, tourism and that sort of stuff. But for Pulisic to kind of announce himself more towards the Italian fans, and they're able to kind of hear his voice in Italian language, makes a big difference. So I think it's only going to continue to grow. And when he's having the performances that he's having, he's being the most consistent player. He's rapidly becoming one of the bigger faces on the team. I think he's going to be up there with Theo, Magnan, and then obviously Leao as well, because I think he is the face of this team. So yeah, I think it's only going to grow. Like, it's just, how difficult it is in this time period as a Milan fan. If you're not winning like trophies, it's kind of harder to elevate your legacy to another level, because a lot of people are harping on negatives right now, and understandably so, because of how the club is being managed.
Like, if Milan were, I don't know, like, they were off to a very good start and they were like maybe a point or
like, say
we people would be talking about Pulisic, I think, in the different. I mean, we get a lot of coverage in the US, with CBS on the Golasso shows and the morning shows they have. But like, I think if he was winning trophies, or like was kind of like Milan were trending in that way, I think that more global respect and attention and appreciation for Pulisic as a player would only take, trophies. That's a huge part of it, right? How many times have we seen players have bad performances, but at the end of the day, okay, but they won. What's her name? For the New York Liberty, Sabrina Ionescu. She had a horrible performance, but they won. So everyone's like, who cares? So winning can make you into that superhero type player.
100%. It's funnier too, because I think the best example recently with Milan would be, he rebounded in the second half of the season during the Scudetto winning year, was Kessie. Kessie was not good that year. Many would,
but even Rafa's year, like Rafa statistically, like, I think people also will look at that season and think that he had this sort of like whopping performance as far as numbers.
No, it was the second half he turned off.
The second half he turned it on, but I think he wound up with like 9 goals, 8 assists, 9 goals, 9 assists. Like, he didn't have.
His past 2 seasons, he had a greater goal and assist contribution in Serie A than he did the previous year.
But they won a trophy
the year that they won the title. It was really like, because Rebic was getting a lot of minutes. People still forget that. Like, Rebic was like taking a lot of minutes from Leao at that point. But you're right. I think it ultimately has to. I'm going to be talking to a tactical manager about this. So great channel for you guys to go and follow if you're interested in more U.S. men's national team side of things. He does a great job of recapping all the Americans in Europe. So yeah, again, has to come with trophies. They have an opportunity with the Supercopa format. We'll see. That might be their best chance this year. Point blank. Moving on to a competition of the Champions League. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for this one. I was in Rome to watch. Listen, 3 points is 3 points. Funnily enough, when we're up a man, we seem to play worse than we were down a man against Udinese. For me, this was about just winning. You had to get a good performance in. Again, I did not love it. We were getting outplayed. I think Mike Magnan, I know Reinders got man of the match. He was well deserved. I thought Okafor did a good job, had a good cameo. I thought obviously Pulisic did great. I even thought Rafa was very good in the 60 minutes, and we'll go into a little bit of that. But Mike Magnan, make no mistake, I think they won this game because of him. Within the first half, in those first, I think 15, 20 minutes, the amount of saves that he came up
3 to 4, easy.
Just
in the first 5 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah. And Ali Fisher of Sempre Milan also mentioned this too. I think he's back into that Scudetto winning form, and that's someone they sorely
comes
need.
At the right time too, right? And real quick, and I'll let you continue. But
no, go.
It's interesting too, right? Because I think that you have 2 players that are very important to Milan, want pay raises, that are captain candidates in Mike Magnan and Theo Hernandez.
I think Teo was
Mike
captain for
Maignan,
this game, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Mike was captain against Udinese. I think they gave it back to Teo for
Teo
this.
for
But go
this.
ahead. I'll look it up. You go.
So Mike Maignan, I think, has been the much more consistent player this year for Milan, despite having a very, very bad defense in front of him. And that's a player that's showing, whether we buy into it or not, and it's one of those things where it always happens around when a player needs a new contract. They're always healthy and they're always playing at their best, right?
Yes.
But I think with Mike Maignan, it's one of those things where I think that when in the conversation of his contract renewal, which is still ongoing, and it looks like it's heading in a really good direction, we might actually get a solution to that soon, I hope, maybe in the next couple months, month or two.
I hope, yeah.
That's a player that we have known to be of really great quality, but there's always been that doubt where, like, I need to see more. I need to see if he can stay healthy. This is a lot of money. Milan are still in a position financially where they can't be giving 3 to 4 players 8 million, 7 million a year. They can't do that yet, at least, or maybe they don't want to, right? That's another conversation. Yeah. But I think when you look at Mike, I think that fans have been saying, like, show me, like, this is the year, like, give me a little more to show us that you deserve that contract. And right now, I know that we're not in a great position as far as where we want to be in the table. In the Champions League, we're still out of the top 24 that would advance as of right now. He's a player that is putting forth the performances that say, like, hey, like, I'm showing you what I'm capable of doing. I'm healthy, knock on wood. I'm putting in really good performances despite being behind a defense that's still finding itself. That's a player that's proving that he's maybe deserving of that contract and that there's those new wages. Whereas with Teo, it's interesting because we know he's a great player, just like Mike, but I think that there's those brain rot performances sometimes from him where he'll do something so chaotic.
He did this in the first half of last year.
And you're like, this guy is very frustrating sometimes because, you think post Scudetto, like, okay, this guy's top left back. He's going to only take your natural steps in the maturation phase of his game, and he's going to be an eventual captain. And when you wear the captain's armband, you have to act and
he was captain for this, by the way.
And that's where I think that people are starting to kind of, maybe look at both players in the conversation for renewals because, I think that there's still a possibility that you keep both. But I think if you had asked that question to the fan base now, is who is right now more deserving of their renewal? Is it Mike or is it Teo? And you might get a lot of people that are saying Mike because of the performances he's putting in. I'm not saying that Teo hasn't been good. I think that Teo's had his moments this year where he has been good, but he's also had his moments where he hasn't been that good, especially very early on in the season where he looked horrible. So I think that is something there that we have to watch out for. But, again, just right back on this performance, yeah, Mike was superb. I mean, he looked like the fit top goalkeeper we've come to know and appreciate at this club. And it's extra when it's on the Champions League level. It's extra when we absolutely needed to have a victory in this match. And without him, I know you mentioned it, Tijani got the player of the match, but without him, Milan probably aren't in that position where for Tijani to become the man of the match. This could be a 2-0 or 2-1 type of result where now you have to scramble to maybe just get a draw. So I think Mike keeps you in that game because we didn't look very sharp to start the game.
And again, that goal conceded was not his fault. Reinders, Teo, Leao, everybody is culpable in that one. In the Club Brugge match, just snoozing to start the second half. Again, I thought they played outside of those spurts where Brugge were hitting on the counterattacks because again, this is just where Milan consistently get exposed. I thought. So I think we can't avoid the Leao conversation with this one. It's hard to we're not going to harp on it, but we have to kind of address it a little bit. The hate makes no sense. This particular performance was not warranted the hate that came his way. I will say there was only one glaring thing in this game from him that infuriated me, and I'll tell you what it was. It was passing up on that opportunity to score that goal.
Yeah.
That layoff there was just the completely wrong decision. Like, it's not even like, oh, yeah, unselfish, that's great. It's like, no, like, that's like a really bad decision. You're clear on goal there. Trust yourself. Try and shoot. And that's kind of where players get into their own heads where it comes to that because he's a very inconsistent finisher. And it kind of takes away from the positives that he did. He was creating chances. He had that layoff for Pulisic. That shot got saved. People were like, "Oh, that wasn't that great of a chance." It's like, yes, it was. Like the angle is difficult. Like Brugge is sitting deep. Like it's not easy to break that down. He's completing the most dribbles. And it's even funnier because everyone wants to harp on this defensive side of things. He won the most duels in the match, and he didn't play the last 30 minutes. He did not play the last 30 minutes. And the guy that you're critiquing, like, that's why it's so funny to me, because not everyone, a lot of people are picking and choosing on what they think should be, the judgment of this player. The consistency in the Champions League has to be far greater. He has to rise to the occasion. I think we could all admit that. We want him to be a better goal scorer. We all need him to be a better goal scorer. We know that's true. But that also doesn't mean that he's playing poorly. I think when people think that, it's just silly, because the expectations are just stupidly high for a player. And it's going to come to the point where if they don't meet your expectations, which for I think a good amount of the time, they're unrealistic, but also there's plenty of fans that have fair expectations of him. And that's like, hey, we need you to step up further in some of these matches. Like Liverpool, kind of, where is he at?
Yeah.
Leverkusen, where are you? Because they see that PSG match last year and they're like, okay, now where is that all the time? And that's sort of like, well, to sustain that level of consistency and what he did against PSG is really hard. It's not like he's willfully choosing not to be like that. I don't think that's true. It's just that there are levels to this shit. And you know what? Maybe he's just not Vinny. Vinny is incredible. Vinny is going to be one of the best players of his generation if he's not already. To kind of compare him to that, and I get it, because he's like, I want to be compared and put in these conversations with these players. Like, I get it. It's gonna come with the territory. But also, like, for me, and I've said this how many times now, like, maybe he's just not that good like we want him to be. And he's still a great player. It's just not that level. And unfortunately, that's okay. And by the way, with the last point, I'll let you go so we could wrap up the match and we could end here, is that everyone's like, oh, this guy isn't worth 150 million. Listen, release clauses aren't always just that. Barcelona have players that they have release clauses of like 600-700 million. You think that they're worth that amount? No, this is just about protecting great players and stamping a figure that, like, you're more than okay with accepting if that player's release clause were to be triggered. It's not like, oh, wow, can't believe we have to let him go for that amount. It's just, to me, it's like silly. Yes, we have to expect more from him on a consistent basis, because the goal scoring is nowhere near what we want. But this is still a player putting in good performances. And by the way, if you love work rate so much, go and watch Alexis Salamakers at Roma, because it just, the amount of overrating work rate for a winger and an attacking player is getting tiresome. And that's where I'll leave it at that. Final thoughts on that, topic.
I think that, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but just bear with me. Temper your expectations, temper your standard. If you have a player like Rafa, or a player like Teo, or whoever that you want to talk about in this team, ultimately, what do you want from the player, right? Because if the conversation is going to be, oh, I love Rafa, but he doesn't do enough on defense, he doesn't track back. I love Rafa, but he's to your point, the work rate isn't where it needs to be. There many people try to sort of craft and mold players into their perfect ideal version of what that player should be in relation to the best of the best, or the best period in their respective position in the sport. Okay. And it's one of those things where I don't want Rafa becoming a work rate merchant where he's tracking back and he's spending most of his time defending, because Lord knows we're defending quite a bit and we don't do it that well, period. I'd rather my player, my best player, maybe him, Pulisic, 1-2, whatever, in the attack, forward, where he can make the biggest impact. Go back to the Scudetto winning season. Was Rafa coming under such criticism then? Was he this sort of defensive?
Wasn't even brought up.
Wasn't even a conversation, right? Yeah. It wasn't even, These conversations only come when the results are poor, the mood and the feeling and the vibe around the club is poor or on the down, or there's a lot of doubt and uncertainty about the results coming ahead and the rest of the season. So naturally, they're like, what can we nitpick this player for? Because they're always going to go after the best players. The best players are always going to be the ones that get the most criticism, right? It's not going to be the middle of the pack player that gets picked apart, right? How many people consistently are lashing out at Ruben Loftus-Cheek for bad performances? This is an England international who's played at Chelsea. He's played in the Champions League. He's won a Champions League. He don't get ripped apart the way that Rafa does at certain moments. You know, right?
And he was way worse in this game.
And he was way worse. So that is my point. Rafa isn't a perfect player. I don't think he's going to become all of a sudden this player that's two ways, and now he's running back, tracking, slide tackling to clear ball. He's not. That's not going to be that player. That's the reality, guys. So if that's the player you want, I think you're looking in the wrong place. And if that's the player you want, I think it's unrealistic, because in this team specifically, it's a team sport, guys. There's a lot of other things that happen and circulate throughout a match that allow Vinny to be the dynamic player he is in the attacking third. If you put Vinny in the situation, do you think he's doing the same things? I don't think he is, because I think the expectation is going to be different. He's got other people in that Madrid side, Vinny, that work for him, that can cover that defensive ground. Look at all the years when Messi he wasn't even running for Barca, but they had to cover his end on the defensive side. They had to cover space for him so he can do what he does best in the final third.
And that was my next question for you too. And I think it's interesting because we talk about these absences in the midfield. There's not enough balance. Where do you think it gets exposed? Because if you don't have guys, and Kessie used to do this greatly on the left side, right, covering for players. Yeah, but he would be everywhere, right? The way this formation is set up, the midfielders that they don't have these players with the work rate to cover everywhere. So, like, again, when it's not Rafa's job to do that, like, and it's funnier too in the last point, because I don't want to rip on all these players, but Teo Hernandez has had a worse season than Rafa Leao. Lashed out worse. Getting suspended in a game in which he was captain is more embarrassing.
All penalty situation.
Like, yeah, and he was the one for that. Rafa was kind of, I think, like third or fourth in like Tomori, Tammy, and Teo were all the ones that were culpable in that, and like we're sitting in and getting angry at Leao. So
and also too the other stuff with him, it's like Capello to Sky. Oh, he didn't go and celebrate with Camarda. And then there's literally an actual celebrating with Camarda.
Yeah, so he was.
It's the issue that I've come to realize with this sport is the media. It's the media. And the media is very culpable in a lot of what happens wrong with players at certain clubs, because I think that aspect of this sport is so important. You could be great with all the physical tools, the technical tools, all the ability in the world. If you can't handle the media giants, and all the pressure and the unjust criticism and hate that you can get, and don't confuse in the comments and those listening, criticism for saying, well, why can't he be criticized? Every player is worthy of criticism.
Correct.
But fair criticism, unbiased criticism. So when I look at how the media treats certain players and then how they treat other players, right? There's always going to be the media darlings, the players that are revered and loved by the media. We see it a lot in American sports, right? But how players deal with the media, I think is if it's not already a focus for clubs, it should be a major, major focus. Because I think that for what Rafa has accomplished at this club, being so young when he did accomplish it, and a lot of the pressure that he has on himself right now, the amount of criticism he gets on a regular basis for just petty bullshit, not smiling enough. I'm joking about that one. Not being in. Oh, he's not celebrating. He didn't cheer hard enough.
Body language.
Celebrate a goal hard enough. He's making it about himself. Those things are complete nonsense and bullshit, and those are narratives framed by the media. So I think that's where the coach has to come into play. That's where the figures that be in management have to come into play and protect and shield your best players and your players in general from the media, because this happens a lot. I feel as though that when you had all this blow up with Di Canio and the criticism that Leao's getting in the media, I'm hoping there are people on a daily getting around players like Rafa, Teo, and the like, and saying like, and
Reassuring
like
them.
supporting them, because you
Yeah.
can be very isolated in these moments. You know,
Yeah. It can be difficult.
there's the media market, like in New York. Players they're playing in the New York media, it comes with the territory, and people say, well, that comes with the territory and playing
Yeah.
for a big club or a big franchise. I
Alec
understand
Boehm
that.
is a great example of
But
something.
but you talk about the psychological and the mental health aspect of this sport and sports in general. That's huge in this. That's
Yeah.
huge, because if you can't keep a player and shield a player from the media manipulation and the media contorting certain things and
I agree.
warping what they view as reality,
Yeah.
that's where you get a lot of players that can lose it. They lose confidence. They say, I can't do it in this league. I can't deal with the media. And they shy away from the moment. I don't see that as the case with Rafa, but I
Yeah,
think
he's
that
not like
that's what
that.
comes very important. That comes with the territory as a
Yeah.
manager, in my opinion. It's not just
Yeah.
tactical and game day and training. It's protecting the player and managing the player in all aspects of what your job is. And I think that that's what Fonseca really has to do here. How he's done it so far, it's been weird. I think this is another conversation for another day, because I think
Sure.
this could be very long-winded. But I think that ultimately some of the things that he says in the media are very odd, because
Yeah.
the action will say one thing, but then he'll say like, oh, Rafa had a hamstring issue. How did nobody know about this? Because that's what we saw him say in the post-match, right? If I'm correct, after the
Yeah, they were
came off.
saying like how he came back late, and this was like just to double down on what you're saying as well. I had the opportunity to watch Sky Italia over
Yeah.
there, so they have like Beppe Bergomi and
Yeah.
like a couple other people. Bergomi was not one of these guys like going after Rafa. Rafa doesn't play in the match against Udinese. We know why. It was told. It was explained. He came back late from playing. Pulisic got back early from U.S. men's national
Yeah.
team play. We knew that because Pochettino wanted him to
Right.
assimilate quicker. Paid off. It worked. Rafa came back later after he had a good international break, by the way. No one wants to say a thing. Sorry to say that he got a goal contribution against your boys in Poland, but the fact was, it's like, okay, so now it's not good enough that he does against Poland. But they were like ripping Leao. Leao didn't play. Why is he a topic of conversation? Why
Yeah.
are we attacking this player in that instance? But that's where an agenda starts, because instead of what I was like yelling at the TV, and my mother is like not understanding because she doesn't watch the stuff. I'm
Yeah.
like, it's bullshit. They come out, they have a great win against Udinese. They show off their offensive depth and the versatility and how Pulisic is able to slot in as a 10. Chukwueze has a great performance on the right side. Noah Okafor being one of the best substitutes and reserves in all of Serie A, and yet they're talking about the one guy that wasn't on the pitch. Like, why is it the negative? Why aren't we talking about Teo Hernandez?
And why is it only him?
Why wasn't Teo Hernandez talked about? Wouldn't it be more of a negative that the guy who was suspended for this match because of his bullshit antics should get more shit than the guy who was supposedly resting? Like, that's where it gets dumb, and that's where it gets tiresome. And by the way, backing up players, Rafael Leao did back up this young teenage sensation and Francesco Camarda after his goal was ruled out. We knew he was coming in for this game, and this will be the final like topic here before we end, guys. So just hang tight here. So Francesco Camarda gets on. I'll pat myself on the back. I absolutely nailed it. I was like, if we could just get him on the 75th minute, we'll see whatever the situation is, and get him a cameo because of Tammy's shoulder. Jovic has been hurt this entire time. It's really just Morata. You can't keep pushing Morata for 90 minutes. Camarda, again, the growth is obvious. Didn't end up getting that goal, just offside. That was, in my opinion, I watched it live. I know you had to watch it like later on. So it's a little different because you knew what happened. But in that moment, that felt like my club was back. That was like one of those like moments where you're like, yes. And you see the tattoos of the Curva Sud logo, I think is on his thigh. When he's celebrating, physically looks better, positionally better. I mean, he was just offside by a decent amount, but we're talking about the youngest ever debutant in Champions League history. nearly scoring. And by the way, it was really difficult for him to score in the final 15 to 20 minutes because Club Brugge is holding on for dear life because they're down 3-1. Again, shout out to Reinders. I thought fun. I know everybody wants to kind of harp on like, oh, look how much better Milan did after Leao came off. Okay, well, first of all, I want to give some credit to Paulo Fonseca because I thought he nailed the subs in the second half of this one. Regardless of what we thought of Leao, Okafor comes on, he contributes, does pretty much the same thing that Leao did. There was an instance where Leao had that in-swinging cross that would have been the same exact goal for TG. TG should have had a hat trick. Loftus-Cheek interferes pretty much with that. He tries to do this little flick on, and that affects the ball and the trajectory of it, and Reinders no longer gets a clear chance. Leao also had a layoff to Teo as well, where he missed it. But Francesco Camarda, I feel so bad for this kid because this is why ratings are stupid. He gets the offside goal. If you look at the rating on FootMob, it's like a 5.8, but because he got a yellow card because he took his shirt off because he thought he scored his first ever goal for the club. So that automatically tanks it. I'll let you speak on like what you kind of saw from him and the evolution. Physically, way better. We kind of know that he's going through puberty still, so he's still just a kid. So he's gonna only keep on growing. I think they're doing a good job of physically developing him. But my goodness, we've seen quite a few strikers in here. That's a 9. That is a 9. That is a guy that is looking to poach goals. He had a couple instances as well. I mean, just the heading finish. It's really his positioning that's impressive, Matt, in my opinion, for his age, because everybody wants to talk about the technical ability. That's all there, too. Just saying, man, if there's a consistent run of games coming up and he can get some minutes and build some more confidence, yeah, this is legit. This is not – I'm not going to put a ceiling on it. I don't know. But I think this is pretty much an incredible young talent that is adapting faster than I kind of thought. We'll see when his chances are and when he'll get more minutes. We'll see what Tammy's situation is and Jovic. But, man, it's a high-pressure situation. I was talking to Ollie Fisher about it, too. Ollie was sort of like, doesn't seem bothered by it, of what that moment is. We see a lot of guys come up sort of small, put too much pressure on themselves, where their brain is moving faster than their body, a.k.a. Andrea Poli, when he's slipping and falling down in that clip. To me, unfortunately, he didn't score, but this is something to build off of. And I think, by the way, that not scoring this goal is a good thing because it gives him even more hunger to push further because not quite that moment yet. It might have felt like that because it's kind of complicated with how VAR works. So, like, his emotions were sort of released in that sort of happiness, and he spoke on it. There's really something to build off of here, and I hope they do right by it in developing. What did you think of that before we finish?
Francesco Camarda was very, very impressive in his very short cameo. I think, the match called for him to be playing a little carefree, not free of pressure because we were in such an advantageous position. So he can go there and just kick the ball about. And he had moments where positionally and movement wise, he looked good. He came up into the midfield. He was connecting with certain players, doing 1-2s, and then he would spill back into his area up front. And he was getting involved. I look for players that are young to see how they insert themselves into matches. Do they shy away from the moment? Are they scared of the ball? Are they timid? Are they afraid of making the mistakes? And look, the match and the way that match was going was perfect for him. That was a perfect opportunity for him to get his debut. We knew he was going to get called up by Paulo Fonseca earlier in the week, and then obviously that doesn't always translate to minutes, but the result wound up being so favorable for Fonseca and Camarda that he got his debut. And beyond the goal getting reversed by VAR, the movement was there. And I think physically we've seen that sort of step taken in his maturation from the last time we saw him play for Milan. He came on, he had that grin right in his debut.
15
years old. He didn't really have the opportunity to get involved too much in the match, but 15, right? And then a lot can change in months when you're so young as far as your physical development. And I think that, when you see him floating around the defenders and getting involved in the match, physically, profile-wise, he looks like he's more ready. And whether or not he's ready to take on more minutes and heightened expectations is another conversation. But I think if we just look at the 15-minute performance in a vacuum, I think this is a player that, when we do see him, there is growth there. It doesn't maybe necessarily always be tied to a goal or an assist, but the fact that you can put him in a match and he feels like he fits and he belongs is very important for Camarda, and that's what I saw in his
The
performance.
pictures were so great.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately,
he was elated. It was a great moment for Milan fans, and I think which made it even more special was the fact that he's
scored
one
it
of
in
our
front
own.
of the curva too.
He's an academy player. This is a player that we have such high expectations for. He's grown so much and accomplished so much at the international level with Italy, and with all the goals he's compiled for Milan's youth sectors. I think that, look, we brought in strikers for the summer. We still have guys in his position that are going to make it difficult for him to get opportunity. But I think it's pretty clear that this player is further along than most his age.
Again, you can't put I don't think he's the best youth play. Lamine Yamal is I think he's
most his
no,
age.
I'm not trying to compare the two because there's still ways to go for him.
For sure.
He's been so with the Futuro. The issues lie deeper in what's going on over there.
Yeah.
I've seen the games. He's come close to scoring. He also hasn't started and played in every game over there too. Yeah. It's a little different. He played half a match. I believe Paulo Torre got a red card. They were winning, and they end up losing 3-1 because it's so funny because I don't even. That guy is so bad. He's so red card in Serie C. How shit are you, dude? This guy. How you expect to play anywhere else? You're turning down moves everywhere at professional level, bro. You're going to be in the USL in 6 months. It's horrible. It's so bad. It's funny to me because he's just, oh my God, this guy's sabotaging his career. And it's a laughing matter, I think. But yeah, really happy with this. But it also makes me be like, all right, when's the next kid coming? Because again, I think the massive positive, and I think we talked about this heading into the season, is when do we start seeing these kids come in, Italian youngsters? And we know Donnarumma came in, I think when he was 12 or 13 to Milan. He was there for a few years, obviously a Milan fan the entire time. This is Camarda is growing up, watching matches in the Curva Sud.
Yeah.
And then playing since he was 8. This is Maldini levels of and Baresi levels of the potential is there where it's that this could be something special if all goes.
I think we need this too after Tonali was sold. We need someone that has such an affiliation and attachment to the club to be a star. So I think fans also see they felt something was taken away with Tonali, that they see something in Camarda. We're all right, we need that next guy.
Yes, that's so easy to root for, that you're who can we sort of identify with as fans?
Yeah.
Because you can love players like Leao, Teo, but and Leao posted it after the match where he's a true Milanista. And it's not to say Rafa is a Milanista. Of course he is in a different way, but true in your blood, growing up with that. Just again, that's why I was so emotional with Tonali and even Gabbia when Gabbia got the winner, because it was again, it's that's one of us.
Yeah.
If we live out a dream like that. And I think he talked, because it's a very funny quote when you hear teenagers say this stuff. I've dreamt about that my entire life.
Yeah. He was I dreamt about that since I was a kid. I'm you're still 16.
Dude, you are a kid. You're a child. You're still a child. And that's what's great. And he's so well. And it's, oh, dude, it's so frustrating because that would have been one of the all-time moments in club history that isn't winning a trophy. I think for me, identifying with the club and seeing something so great was in recent years, and I'll wrap it up here. This is just me, gushing as a fan because it's just awesome. This is what makes it the best. When Maldini scored that header against Spezia, that was that does not get better than that. There's wins and there's dramatic, thrilling victories. And I think even Tonali having those big goals against like Lazio and that sort of stuff, Verona, like it gives you chills and you're like, okay, maybe things aren't as dark as they might be perceived. And I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, that'll pretty much wrap up this episode. That Milan podcast is on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcasts. Go and follow us on Twitter at that Milan pod, TikTok, obviously here on YouTube, like, subscribe in the content, Instagram as well. X, Twitter, yeah, whatever you want to call it. The support is immense. It's been great. It's a lot of fun to do these videos. You go follow me at Martino Puccio everywhere. Obviously, Santangelo and his brother Nick do AC Milan Bros as well. And Matt's stuff has been on the ticker. Everything's in the description as well. Go follow all those podcasts. MLM podcast, Milan Weekly podcast, Coast to Coast with Gio and Fabio, Sempre Milan podcast, Old Heart, Rossonero, Football Kush. Kush is just immense. Kush, like,
you want to talk about work rate?
Again, yeah. And Kush is always well thought out, logical. We've been with him since like the start, and it's just like a great community of content creators for the most part. And to see someone like him, Kush is like a guy that elevates everyone around him. Like a rising tide carries all ships. And there's so much different content and good content creators within Milan that I think Kush being one of the faces of that is a great thing. Because Kush is just a stand-up guy. He means well. And we could say, obviously, the majority of you, I'm sure, also already subscribe to Kush. But Kush, like, on the platform of YouTube, is exemplary.
Yeah.
And then shout out to our guy, Min Marco, by the way. Not sure if I got that right, brother, but he does great stuff as well. Huge on TikTok. One of the next generation of Milan fans there. He'll be on the podcast soon enough. Was just talking to him. Again, Santangelo, any final things that you want to say before we head out here?
It's great to be back recording. Thank you guys
went over an
for
hour,
the consistent support, for all the likes, comments, subscribes, all that good stuff. And yeah, hopefully we get to see a Milan match very soon, unless, of course, they decide to cancel that one for whatever reason. So
yes, Tuesday against Napoli. Stay tuned. We will probably record on Wednesday. It's best for timing and everything involved with that. So we'll just do something post-match with that. I'll see if I can go live as well. I'll let you guys know. So stay tuned on social media for that. Other than that, take care.